Image copyright Reuters. Image caption Mr. Mnangagwa, nicknamed the Crocodile, has been part of the ruling elite for many years. Emerson Mnangagwa has been sworn in as Zimbabwe's president in a ceremony at a packed stadium in the country's capital, Harare. It follows the dramatic departure of Robert Mugabe after 37 years of authoritarian rule. The former vice president's dismissal earlier this month led the ruling ZANU-PF party and the army to intervene and force Mr. Mugabe to quit. Mr. Mnangagwa, who had fled the country, returned from exile on Wednesday. The opposition is urging Mr. Mnangagwa, who has been part of the ruling elite, to end the culture of corruption. Although Mr. Mnangagwa has unseated Zimbabwe's longtime ruler, he is still associated by many with some of the worst atrocities committed under the ruling ZANU-PF party since the country gained independence in 1980. He was the country's spymaster during the 1980s civil conflict, in which thousands of civilians were killed. But he has denied any role in the massacres, blaming the army. After being sacked as part of a power struggle over who would succeed Mr. Mugabe as president, Mr. Mnangagwa fled to South Africa 2 weeks ago only to return home on Wednesday to a hero's welcome. Media playback is unsupported on your device. Media caption We need fairness, not corruption. How has the inauguration unfolded? Tens of thousands of people packed the National Sports Stadium at Harare to witness the inauguration. Pop singer Jah Prayzah provided the entertainment and, as people in the crowd danced, the atmosphere was closer to that of a concert. Dignitaries, including leaders from various African countries, filed into cheers. Opposition leaders Morgan Tsvangirai and Joyce Mujuru, who have both also had their sights on the presidency at various times, were there. Mr. Mnangagwa was led in the oath of office by Chief Justice Luke Malaba, saying he would be faithful to Zimbabwe, protect and promote the rights and people of Zimbabwe, and discharge his duties to the best of his abilities. Mr. Mnangagwa was accompanied by his wife Auxilla and gave her a kiss after the green presidential sash was placed around his neck. The crowds cheered a 21-gun salute and a flypast. Was Mr. Mugabe there? No, and the official reason given was that at 93, the former president needed to rest. But the fact he is not attending is a stark reminder that this is no ordinary transition, the BBC's Andrew Harding reports, and that despite his official resignation, he was forced out by the military. On Thursday, several reports suggested Mr. Mugabe had been granted immunity from prosecution. Image caption President Mugabe was accused of preparing the presidency for his wife Grace. Local media are reporting that Mr. Mnangagwa has offered the Mugabe family maximum security and welfare. The former president expressed his good wishes and support for the incoming president, the Herald newspaper reports. How did Zimbabwe get to this point? The news on Tuesday that 93-year-old Mr. Mugabe was stepping down sparked wild celebrations across the country. It came in the form of a letter read out in Parliament, abruptly halting impeachment proceedings against him. He had been under pressure since the military took control of the country a week before. The first rumors that something was afoot started to spread when military vehicles were spotted on roads leading to Harare. Later that day, soldiers seized the headquarters of Zimbabwe's national broadcaster ZBC and explosions and gunfire were heard. On Thursday, Mr. Mugabe was pictured taking part in talks with Gen. Constantino Chiwenga and South African government ministers at State House, and on Friday, the president gave out degrees at a university of which he is chancellor. On Saturday, tens of thousands of Zimbabweans took to the streets of Harare to urge Mr. Mugabe to go. The demonstration was led by veterans of the country's War of Independence, who last year turned against him. On Sunday, ZANU-PF sacked Mr. Mugabe as its leader, and 2 days later he resigned as president. In his letter, Mr. Mugabe said he was resigning to allow a smooth and peaceful transfer of power, and that his decision was voluntary. Will the change be good for the economy? Zimbabwe's economy is in a very bad state. It has not recovered fully from crises in the last decade, when rampant inflation grew so bad the country had to abandon its own currency. Now, according to some estimates, 90% of people there are unemployed. Mr. Mnangagwa has pledged to create jobs. We want to grow our economy, we want peace, we want jobs, 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 he told cheering crowds in Harare. Zimbabwe's main industrial index has slumped by 40% since last week's military intervention. The stock market has shed $6 billion, £4.5 billion in a week. Analysts say the market is now correcting itself, optimistic of a change of economic policy under Mr. Mnangagwa. However, the International Monetary Fund has warned that Zimbabwe must act quickly to dig its economy out of a hole and access international financial aid. What comes next politically? On Thursday, Zimbabwe's main opposition MDC party called for deep-rooted political reform to dismantle the repressive apparatus that sustained Mr. Mugabe's regime. Media playback is unsupported on your device. Media caption: Leader of the opposition MDC party, Morgan Tsvangirai, warns of a power retention agenda as MDC. We are saying, after so many years of ZANU-PF misrule, the first thing that needs to be transformed is the culture. The culture of violence, the culture of corruption. We need to change that culture, MDC leader Morgan Tsvangirai said. And for President Mnangagwa, he must realize that it is not an easy walk in the park. It is unclear whether ZANU-PF will govern alone ahead of scheduled elections next year, or whether a coalition government of national unity that includes opposition groups will be formed.